If I talk about a European island that's divided into a former British colony where you drive on the left and whose economy has grown substantially in recent years, what country would you think about? I'm sure many of you would say Ireland, right? Sorry, we won't be looking at the country of Guinness, the Harlings, and green leprechauns this time. There's another island, which isn't talked about much, that also fits that description. In this video, we're going to talk about Cyprus, a Mediterranean island that is much hotter than Ireland, but which is also a territory split in two. You see, this story isn't that well known. On the island of Cyprus, we can find two different states: the Republic of Cyprus and the self-proclaimed Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which is only recognized as a sovereign country by Turkey. So while the southern part is fully integrated within the European Union, the northern part only interacts with Turkey's political and commercial networks. So as you can imagine, both sides have huge political and economic differences. Now, surely many of you might be wondering, well, but how did this small Mediterranean island become divided? What is the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus? We're going to answer these and many other questions in this video.
Cyprus, a casualty of the great empires.
This isn't a unique case. In many of the colonies of the former British Empire, decolonialization brought a lot of ethnic and territorial problems. This is just another example. Cyprus was granted to the United Kingdom as a protectorate following an agreement with the Ottoman Empire at the end of the 19th century. It was given control of the island in gratitude for the support that the British had given to the Ottomans in their war against Russia. However, it wasn't until the beginning of World War I in 1914 that the United Kingdom formally declared Cyprus a colony. Now, how was this colonial territory? How did it end? How did it affect Cypriot history? Well, the truth is that the colonization of Cyprus wasn't plain sailing. You see, many Cypriots, especially those of Greek ethnicity, utterly rejected colonial rule, and now that they had been freed from the Ottoman Empire, they wanted to annex the island to Greece, something known as a gnosis. And as you can imagine, the Cypriots of Turkish origin didn't like that idea very much, as they didn't identify with Greece at all. We're talking about a confrontation that fueled several revolts, which in some cases had to be stifled by British forces. Now, the biggest problem, the final confrontation, happened after they gained independence in 1960. The confrontation for power between the Greek community and the Turkish community escalated to such a point that just 3 years after independence in 1963, violence broke out. The situation led Turkey to threaten military intervention in order to protect Turkish Cypriots. Finally, the United States managed to defuse the situation, but the battle had just begun. After years of intermittent instability and tense calm, finally, in 1974, a controlled coup d'etat from Athens overthrew Archbishop Makarios III's government and triggered, just 5 days later, Turkey's invasion of northern Cyprus. And so that's how a division was drawn which continues to this day, and which was formally recognized in 1983 with the unilateral creation of the State of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, a country of just 300,000 inhabitants, which is only recognized by Turkey, and that 36 years after its independence doesn't even have a national anthem. It also explains why, in the capital city of this island, Nicosia, we can find a Berlin-style wall that divides the city in two. But would you like to know how Cyprus handles this national division today, and what remains of the past tensions? What would we find if we went to Nicosia, Cyprus's capital, right now?
Nicosia, Europe's last divided capital?
Walking through some areas of Nicosia today is the closest thing to walking through old divided Berlin. In many streets, especially those of the old walled city, you can see barriers, fences and walls made with barrels filled with concrete. It's the separation between the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot Nicosia, a separation that has a completely abandoned demilitarized strip that is controlled by the UN, known as the Green Line. This line extends from end to end across the island and is a Korean-style demilitarized zone with a maximum width of 7 kilometers and which accounts for 3% of the entire island's territory. But it's in the capital, Nicosia, where the Green Line is most apparent. It is there that the worst clashes between both communities took place during the second half of the 20th century. To give you an idea, in the capital, time seems to have stopped along the strip, and as a testament of that convulsive past, you can see, for example, the former airport. It's a facility that was completely abandoned in 1974, yes, since the coup and subsequent Turkish invasion. Now the only function of this airport is to serve as a backdrop when a few tourists decide to pose for pictures in the old waiting rooms and in front of the corroded 60s-style check-in desks which seem to have been left over from an apocalyptic movie. Of course, for those who love dark tourism, it's a must-see. And that's not all. In the old workshops and car dealerships of the Green Line in Nicosia, you can see old imported and abandoned models that nobody has touched since 1974. There are also bars, restaurants, and abandoned houses where you can still see old bottles of Coca-Cola on the table and gunshot blasts on the facades. But we aren't just talking about an abandoned strip of land. Even though the tensions have remained dormant in recent years, the issue goes much deeper. Allow me to explain. Despite being in the Mediterranean, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is one of the most isolated places on Earth. It hasn't been recognized by any countries and has been internationally sanctioned for the past 4 decades. From an international point of view, its only access is Turkey. Its inhabitants lack their own passport, and any establishment with international brands and franchises is prohibited.
At all levels, economically, socially, and politically, it's as if we didn't exist. We live in a country where regular contact with the rest of the world is severely compromised. Ozdil Nami, special Turkish Cypriot representative to the negotiations for resolving the Cyprus dispute.
In fact, it wasn't until 2003, when some restrictions were relieved, that the Green Line was crossed for the first time in more than 30 years. Now, at this point, the question that crops up is, well, what can be done to resolve this? Could this division end soon? Well, if you look at the history, it seems hard, even with the help of the Secretary General of the United Nations, who is determined to achieve reunification. Antonio Guterres has set himself the challenge of achieving an agreement to reunify Cyprus under a bi-communal and bi-zonal federal system. And to do so, 2020 could either be a turning point or just another year on the already long list of Cyprus's diplomatic failures. For now, the UN has set itself the objective of resuming negotiations in mid-2020.
UN hails frank Cyprus talks, vows to seek peace effort restart. Al Jazeera.
However, in recent years, a new player has emerged, further complicating the issue.
Reunification, an impossible road?
When anything breaks, putting it back together is very complicated. And of course, if we're talking about countries, it can be an almost impossible mission. That's exactly what's happening in Cyprus. You see, even though the tensions between both communities have greatly decreased, there are still difficult barriers to overcome. What will happen to the Turkish troops, considering that Turkish Cypriots basically depend on them? How will the issue of the properties seized from Greek Cypriot owners be resolved? How will both communities be politically organized so that one isn't under the other's control? How will the territory be distributed? What will happen with social policy? Will the South finance the development of services and infrastructure in the much poorer North? And with all these questions comes a now geostrategic problem, one that threatens to kill these negotiations and which has a lot to do with something we've already talked about here on this channel. Cyprus is currently involved at a commercial and economic turning point that Turkey doesn't approve of. And even though the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is in theory an independent country, the truth is that Turkey rules Northern Cyprus's interests by aligning them with theirs, especially when it comes to international politics. After all, it's the only country that recognizes this republic while also maintaining more than 30,000 soldiers deployed on the island. The fact is that it's here that we face a new obstacle in the shape of a long, thick tube located under the sea. We're talking about the EastMed gas pipeline. The EastMed is a pipeline whose construction could begin very soon, which will allow Israel to export natural gas directly to Europe by 2025. Israel and Cyprus, which has also begun to exploit its gas reserves at sea. And as we've already discussed in a previous video, Israel has managed to boost its gas production, achieving very significant production figures. In fact, just a short time ago, on January 2nd, 2020, they took a giant step regarding this project.
Leaders from Israel, Cyprus, Greece sign EastMed gas pipe deal. Bloomberg.
Now the question is, why could this be a problem when it comes to conversations about Cypriot reunification? Well, because this clashes directly with the geostrategic and economic interests of Turkey, which is where the gas pipeline that currently takes exported gas from the Middle East to Europe flows. This situation gives Turkey the power to control the passage of a vital supply to a continent that hasn't been very friendly to the Turkish regime in recent years. You can imagine how this goes, right? Well, if we add to this mix the fact that it's Israel who would benefit the most from this project, then things get even more complicated. Because lately, Turkey and Israel are getting on worse than Batman and Joker. So, if reunification was already a challenge, this new confrontation between Turkey and the Republic of Cyprus only looks to make it much more complicated. Anyway, this is how things stand in Cyprus today. But now it's your turn. Did you know about the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus? Do you think these two states should reunify, or should they maintain their independence? Well, leave your answer in the comments below, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Also, please do check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast who provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, this channel is possible because of Patreon and our patrons on that platform. Please join them in supporting our mission of providing independent political coverage. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.